Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're digging into something pretty interesting, a special status that some of India's biggest companies have. They get to manage their own employee retirement funds. So the big questions are, how does that even work? And is it actually safe? We're going to find out.
All right, so here's our game plan. We're going to break down what an exemption really is, how a company gets this golden ticket, what rules they have to play by, and the two ways it can all land. And then, the big one, why any of this bureaucracy even matters. So let's dive right in.
Okay, first things first. What on earth are we talking about when we say a company is exempt? I mean, it kind of sounds like they get a free pass, right? Like they just get to skip out on the whole EPFO thing. But, the reality is a whole lot more structured than that.
So here's the deal. At its heart, an exempted establishment is a company that gets special permission to manage its own employees' retirement money, their Provident Fund, in-house. They don't have to send it off to the EPFO. But, and this is a big but, it is absolutely not a free pass. It's actually a massive responsibility. And it's handled by a completely separate legal entity that's created for this one single purpose.
And that entity is the Provident Fund Trust. Now, this isn't just some department in the company. It's a whole separate legal body run by what's called a board of trustees that the company is required to set up. Their one and only job? To manage all that employee retirement money. We're talking the contributions, the investments, the payouts, the whole shebang. And here's the kicker. They're still super strictly regulated by the very organization they're supposedly exempt from, the EPFO. All right, so you might be wondering, how does a company even get this golden ticket? Well, let me tell you, it is not easy. It's a really formal, multi-stage process, basically designed to make sure that only the most capable and stable companies ever get this privilege. You can think of it like a 4-stage approval gauntlet. Seriously, the application kicks off at the local regional office, where it gets picked apart. If, and that's a big if, it passes muster, it moves up to the zonal office. From there, it's on to the head office for a final look over by not one, but 2 separate committees. And only then does the government even get notified. Every single step is like a filter, designed to catch any potential problems. And yeah, don't expect this to happen overnight. Just that first major step, the review at the regional office, that alone can take up to 10 weeks. It just goes to show you how incredibly detailed the scrutiny is for every single piece of paper. So what are they actually looking at during those 10 weeks? Well, basically a mountain of paperwork. The company has to hand over everything. Their proposed trust rules, a chart that proves their benefits are just as good or even better than what the EPFO offers. They need 3 years of audited balance sheets to show they're financially solid. And here's a really critical one. They need consent from a majority of their own employees.
Okay, so getting the exemption, that's just the beginning of the story. To actually keep that special status, the company and its trust have to play by a very, very strict set of rules. And that board of trustees, man, their to-do list is packed. They've got to make sure the company transfers all the money by the 15th of each month, no excuses. They have to invest all those funds exactly how the government tells them to. They're on the clock with a 20-day deadline to settle any employee claims, like for withdrawals or advances. Plus, they're on the hook for annual audits, getting statements out to every single employee, and meeting every 3 months to make sure everything's on track. It is a full-time job for sure. There's this really powerful line from the official EPFO manual that just says it all. It states that exemption is a privilege, not a right. It's making one thing crystal clear. If conditions change, if anything happens that could harm the employees, that privilege can be and will be taken away. And here's proof of just how seriously they take this stuff. The EPFO actually uses what's called a violation priority matrix. So you've got Category A violations. These are the big ones, like the company losing money for 3 years straight. That triggers an immediate process for cancellation. Done. Then there's Category B, where they get a warning to fix the problem, and even seemingly minor Category C issues, like not putting up a notice on a board. If that happens 3 times, it can still trigger the cancellation process. They are not messing around. And these rules didn't just pop up out of nowhere. They've actually been evolving for decades. If you look back to the 50s and 60s, that's when a lot of key changes were made. They strengthened the oversight, They clearly defined what employers had to do, and, this is so important, they added the legal power to actually cancel an exemption if things started to go sideways.
So, what happens when this special status actually comes to an end? Well, there are really only two ways out. One way is voluntary, and the other one, well, not so much.
The two paths are pretty different. There's a forced cancellation, and then there's a voluntary surrender. Cancellation is exactly what it sounds like. The EPFO yanks the privilege because the company messed up and broke the rules. Surrender, on the other hand, is when the company itself decides to give it up. Maybe the business climate is just too uncertain, or maybe they just want to get back to focusing on their main business.
And like we saw with that matrix, cancellation is never just some random decision. No, it's triggered by very specific red flags, things that scream employee funds could be at risk. We're talking about things like the company consistently losing money, or going through a big change like a merger or sale, or even just failing to get the trust's accounts audited. Any of those are pretty much automatic triggers for cancellation.
Now, even surrendering voluntarily is a formal process. It's not like they can just send a quick email. The Board of Trustees has to pass an official resolution, they've got to give the EPFO plenty of advance notice, and they have to get all the beneficiary lists and accounts ready for a really smooth transition. Oh, and just to be absolutely sure everything's above board, a third-party audit is mandatory to check that the fund is financially healthy before it gets handed over.
But here's the thing. It doesn't matter if it's a forced cancellation or a voluntary surrender. There is one final, absolutely non-negotiable step. All the money that's been saved up in that private trust, what's officially called past accumulations, has to be transferred back to the EPOO. And the rules on this are super explicit. It has to be in cash. Not stocks, not bonds, not other assets. Cash only.
So, after going through all those details, the rules, the forms, the audits, I'm sure you're wondering, why? Why does all this bureaucracy even exist? What's the real big picture here?
Well, for starters, this isn't some tiny niche program we're talking about. As of the last big report, there were over 1,300 of these exempted establishments across India. We're talking about some of the country's largest, most well-known companies. These are major employers, and when you put them all together, they represent a huge chunk of the entire formal workforce. And that brings us to the most important point. Ultimately, this entire super complex system that we've just walked through, it exists for one single primary reason: to protect the lifelong retirement savings of millions of employees. Every single form, every audit, every rule, it's all a safeguard. It's a safety net built to make sure that the money people are counting on for their future is always secure. And that really leaves us with a final and pretty deep question to think about. This whole system, when you boil it down, is built on a fundamental tension. How can you give these large, capable organizations the flexibility to manage their own business while at the same time guaranteeing the absolute rock-solid security of their employees' retirement funds? Finding that perfect balance? Well, that is the challenge that lies at the very heart of this whole EPFO exemption framework.